Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm going to be analysing the longest overtime we've ever seen on LAN. You can see up the top here how long that went on for. Over 12 minutes of overtime between Rule 1 and Vitality on one of the greatest days of Rocket League we've ever seen. And this match was particularly hyped because it was very entertaining Rocket League. It was 0-0, which is the craziest thing to have a 0-0 go on that long. But it was also watching some of the best Rocket League. I think Rule 1 versus Vitality was some of the best fundamentals Rocket League we saw all day. And I think it was really as Vitality was starting to warm up, Rule 1 tested them, and this game was extraordinary to watch. And I wanted to start off with some stats because there was a lot of records being broken with this, with the longest overtime, also the most saves for any team. I think it was 24 was the record broken, and they just kept on getting saves. So you can see here, this is 29 saves. And also when we look through the stats, you can really understand why Vitality were the one in offense more often. There's a lot more shots from them, and what the biggest difference between Vitality and Rule 1 was. So we'll look through, this is this sort of like head-to-heads. So you can see pretty much all the stats in favor of Vitality. On offense more, better with the boost control, getting a few more demos, more possession, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to go through them just one by one. I'm going to skip through to boost because this is the one that's really interesting for me. So you can see the overviews of the boost per minute. There's a lot more boost being used by Vitality, but it's also like they're seconds at 100 boosts. Look at this. It's crazy. It's almost double the amount of Rule 1. And then it's about 2/3 of the seconds with 0 boost. So they're very much staying at 100 more often and not going down to 0 as much. And that's a lot due to Alpha and Zen being very good at maintaining 100 boosts, but not then using 100 boosts for the sake of it. They like to use the least boost possible in any situation. And we'll see that when we go through the gameplay. More big pads being taken by Vitality. That's a lot to do with the fact they're moving faster, and they overfill a lot more because when they're picking up 100s, they're not just picking up 100s when they're down to 0. And you can see there's going to be a standout player that you're going to see. I'm not trying to call him out because I think they played really well in this game, but Mosin, I never know which way around to say it, but his average is very low, and frequently was at 0 boost, and it was often self-inflicted, which you'll see, which is a lot due to nerves. You know, he was a lot of tapping of the boost out of nerves, but I think Kalirs and Roas are also doing the same kind of stuff. Roas less so. Roas is a bit better at saving boost, but also Roas doesn't use enough boost. So it's sort of like one of those catch-22s where they're too static a lot of the time. And so there you can see here, look, the Mosin's going down to that low boost amount quite often and then having to play with barely any boost. Amount used while supersonic, that's mostly just due to the fact they're moving faster, so they're going to be using more while supersonic, and they're also going for those bumps and boost steals and that kind of thing. But yeah, we'll look at the, is that average amount on here? We saw the average amount at the top, was it? Where are we? I think you can see it here. 55 for Zen, 55 for Alpha, 49 for Radosin. Radosin being very comfortable with around 50, but then it's like all of them are higher. And then if we look at the positioning and the heat maps in particular, you can see where they spent majority of the game. So it's very much in the Rule 1 half, where you've got a lot more movement from Vitality covering a lot more ground at speed, where the Rule 1 team are sort of a little more munched up in the middle and not able to move as much. And positioning-wise, this is part of the reason why this game was such a stalemate for so long. There's particularly this one, this one here. So percentage behind the ball is something anyone who's watched my other analysis will know is quite a big stat to look at. And you'll see that both teams, very high percentage behind the ball. So Rule 1, all of them around 75%, which is very, very good to be in the neutral game. And then you can see on the other side, you've got Zen, who's anchoring nice and deep, and Radosin and Alpha, even though they're, a little bit lower compared to the opponents, they're still quite high. Like we've seen some teams have 2 players below 70% with that. So even then with having, this is very similar to that of like the Hogan mode style. Like I mentioned that Hogan mode and Vitality have a lot of similarities when they play, but it's just that Vitality are just better at executing it. And this here is like Zen is in that scrub killer position of sitting very deep and letting the other two work around it and then coming in. But then obviously Zen has got those individual mechanics that are deadly. And then Radosin and Alpha just causing a nuisance, especially Alpha was really like cutting Zen off, causing a nuisance, giving that space for Zen. But they didn't want to overcommit too much. So everyone was playing super safe in this game. And then I think outside of that, nothing too crazy here. It's just like, the general structure there. And then the movement, this is interesting as well. So You can see a lot more time spent at Supersonic by Vitality. They're moving a lot faster. Both teams very grounded, which again is part of that not overcommitting too much. Getting back a lot more, staying more grounded is a good thing if you want to have a hard to score on team, and both these teams are very hard to score on. So you can see here around that 20% mark is a really good percentage supersonic speed. It means you're moving very fast. And like this here from Mosin, this is like very, very low. And these two are even quite low in their own right. And it's just because they couldn't ever sort of open up. They couldn't ever go zooming around. But yeah, you can see here, these are super low, very grounded, like some of the most grounded players. And you can see Radosin's very grounded too. Alpha's, you know, always flying, like he's up all the time. But yeah, Mosin was going for a lot of high aerials, which was why he kept going on get lower boost, because you having to use a lot of boost to get up into the air. But that was also partnered with some really good touches from Mosin, so definitely a good thing. So I wanted to just zip through these before we get into the gameplay. I have just given a once through of the gameplay, so we'll see if we can highlight some of those particular moments. And in particular, what I want you to look at points throughout the replays is what's up at the top, because that's going to give you a real indication of the boost amounts for both teams, and we'll see which of those goals were particularly close. You can see this, the timeline at the bottom, how many saves there were for Rule 1. But the big thing for me is the boost difference between the two teams. Whenever you see Vitality, they tend to have at least 2 players with high boost amounts. When you see Rule 1, they frequently have just the 1 player with a high boost amount. And it's little moments like that with the Radosin boost steal there that are the difference. You see right now, Rawat's the only player with boost, where all of the Vitality players have quite a lot of boost. And it just means that generally Vitality are able to keep pressure on, they're able to keep going because they don't have to spend that lot of time recovering. They can keep turning back in and going. So if we watch Alpha, you'll get an idea of this whole thing. So you can see right now, even though he's doing a lot, he's not draining down to 0 ever. He's always using as little boost as possible, and this is something Alpha's always been very good at. He's had one of the highest average boost amounts of any player in Rocket League, and there you saw the example of Alpha going forward where Zen would stick back, and that was just, I think Zen was much more comfortable sitting deeper in this series. And yeah, you can see just like Alpha is covering so much ground, claiming boost, sticking at 100 boost, and you can see stuff like this. These are the moments there where Vitality, if it wasn't for how good Rule 1 are at reading those goal line saves and like the back foot defense, Vitality would have scored several times here. So Vitality's game plan was one that would win a lot of series, and it ended up being the case when they won the whole tournament, where Rule 1's relies a lot more on mistakes, and because Vitality make few mistakes, they weren't getting that value, where on LAN, Rule 1 managed to get top 4 because their game plan was very safe, very secure, and it forced a lot of mistakes out of people and a lot of overcommitment out of people. But as we saw with the stats, neither team particularly overcommitting in their playstyle. So you get the gist with Alpha. Let's have a little watch of Zen sitting a bit deeper. Oh, actually, I literally just went off Alpha as he almost scored there. We will go back and watch that. This was one of the close chances that we saw. So Alpha rotating out, redirect bar and out. That would have been a goal there if it was just a little bit lower down. So a lot of like close margins throughout the series. And actually, watching this back, I didn't really see a moment where Rule 1 looked like scoring until about 2 minutes into overtime, where we saw frequent opportunities for Vitality. And if you want to watch my Rule 1 analysis that I did before the major, my biggest concern for them was Khalid seems to be the only one on this team who's able to take big risks without the team seeming like they're overcommitting. And a lot of that's down to Rawat being quite static as a player, which does make them very good in defense, because in defense tends to be the place where you slow down the most in Rocket League. But it does mean Rawat's threats aren't as deadly to the higher quality players on the international scene, because they're able to read a slower outplay. Like you see here, like Rawat is completely shut down with these slower outplays, where, you know, Rawat can get that value in the MENA region with those slower outplays. You need to be doing outplays at speed now in Rocket League, and that's why Zen and Alpha in particular have been so deadly, because both of them are able to set up and create opportunities fast before the opponent's able to read them, right? And Radosin is able to act off of those decisions very well. And actually, as the tournament went on, Radosin was one of the deadliest players on the ball, especially in that final. He was looking very, very good. But yeah, you can see here stuff like this with Radosin. You see these kind of touches. That's They're the kinds of touches that we need to see from Rule 1, but they're instead going for this very like neutral focused playstyle. That could have been an opportunity there for Alpha. It was struck a bit better. But when I speak about the neutral game, so this is a big thing that Rule 1 do very well. They've got a very strong neutral game, and that's all the kind of low boost decisions, fakes, forces, boost steals, those kinds of things. Like the parts of the game where you're pretty safe. That bounce almost went in favor of Clears, but Radosin had it pretty well covered. You see there, Rawash shut down with a slower outplay. It's a similar kind of story, but then like Zen's play there, it's a lot more threatening and a lot more scary and can take multiple players out of the game, and that's really the biggest difference maker here. But yeah, with that neutral game, what I would say is Vitality have an amazing neutral game where they're so good at it as a team that it opens up opportunities for them to take risks. They're able to take those risks without it being a big negative, right? Like, because they recover really fast, they're very efficient with their movement. The quality of their touches is so high that players can take risks. Like right now, right? Alpha is willing to overcommit, I say in inverted commas, knowing that his execution is going to be good enough and that everyone behind him is going to come in and clean up after. So they have moments like this where they're deadly, but also still not overcommitting, right? Like Alpha's able to fly up for that, knowing that Zen is got a really good read of the play, and when he gets that ball, he's going to take control of it, right? Where I think Rule 1 are on the side of caution a little bit more, where they don't want to overcommit as much, just in case it goes wrong, because that was one of their weaknesses when we analysed their gameplay against Twisted Minds, is sometimes when they tried taking risks, it led to them overcommitting, and a lot of that comes down to their boost efficiency, so it means that they do struggle to get back sometimes because they are a little bit more reliant on the hundreds, especially Mosin. And as we mentioned, Ruas and Kaliz, their average amounts are a little bit on the lower side. They do waste quite a lot of boost moving around the pitch, which I think we can get an example of. If we watch Mosin for a bit, you can see now on 0. You see how much slower this recovery is? And it means you're out of the play for a lot longer, so you can't take those risks when it could line up with those kind of situations. And you see that touch there from Mosin, that was a lot more boost than was required, so when he landed, he couldn't use that boost to start speeding up, and consequently was bumped on the way through. So this is what we're talking about, is just those tiny little inefficiencies, and that's where Vitality are just on that next level. I think it's really why BDS struggled against them in the final, because BDS were getting punished for being in these situations where one touch would lead to their demise, because Vitality were just swarming them. But yeah, you can see here, right, like, they're on the back foot, and look at the boost amounts right now, like the difference in the boost amounts at the top. You can see how much control Vitality had over that aspect of the game. Like all of Rule 1 right now on 0, and all of Vitality with a good amount of boost, and they'll probably be moving quite fast, which means that they don't need to accelerate with boost. They're already going nice and fast. So that's where the combination of the speed and efficiency really help them out. But we're about to come up to, I think it's Clears who we want to be on, as we get close to one of the big opportunities for Rule 1. This touch here goes into the middle. Mosin off the crossbar. I think Rawas here pops that into the middle. Very close opportunity off the crossbar. Rawas, poor shot high. So yeah, it was almost like they were. That felt like an overtime nervy opportunity where they didn't want to overcommit, so therefore they didn't commit to the shot opportunity fully. Whereas I think that was very scoreable, that situation, if they just you know, lined up with it and committed to the powerful shot, you know. And you can see there again, Kalir's no boost left over to do the play, where when you watch someone like Zen sitting off the ball, the moment that ball falls into his lap, you see he's not overcommitting towards anything, just waiting for the opportunity for the ball to come to him. And so when it does, he's able to make a play on it and then carry on through. And that's where we saw a lot of the time, and in fact we'll see with the winning goal, Zen follows through after his play and causes some commotion. It's like little things like this, right? Like he's got enough boost to follow that up. So it just adds an extra layer on top of every play that they do, and it also increases the recovery speed, because you saw how much quicker you land with the momentum out of the play, right? This was also another close opportunity that Musty just absolutely launching. Let's watch a bit of Radosin, because we haven't given him a huge amount of love. I think people overlook how good he is as a player, because he does a lot of stuff that sets up the teammates around him. He's very willing to sort of get the ball to them, put them in strong positions, and I'm sure his communication is very good, because You know, just the way the team plays around him, it looks like they know what he's going to do. And the decisions not to go, he's very good with those. So I think, yeah, you can see like here, he's probably called that he's not going for that really early, so Zen can just sit nice and deep, ready for the force. And that's really the key with this team, is you've got a player like Radosin who's able to just fill in the gaps behind Alpha, who's creating that zoomy chaos, but then also not trying to be the star too much, because if he tries to do too much, that will mean that Zen and Alpha won't be able to do their thing. So it's important to have a player like Radosin on your team who's a little bit more selfless and a little bit more willing just to disrupt and cause 50s and fill in those gaps. You can see he's always in the play. It's very similar to that Itachi role that we've spoken about in the past. But Radosin just does it a little bit more efficiently. Doesn't use as much boost doing it, and doesn't over challenge. He's much more willing to force, where Itachi's a little bit more challenge focused with his disruption role. And then combine that with the Alpha speed. You've got Alpha who's speedy to the ball, Radosin who's grounded and sort of tricky with the ball, right? Stuff like that. Little touches that just keep that ball moving, keep the flow going, and he gets back into the play nice and quickly. But is capable of doing a little outplay here or there. There's an example of it. This could have been an opportunity here, just not quite nailing that pass. But yeah, we're about 5 minutes into overtime here, and we heard in the Ferret interview that with an overtime, around the first half of this overtime, it was very like, don't overcommit, don't make a mistake. And I think we'll see a shot from Zen shortly. I can't remember if it's just after this, but there's a shot from Zen where he very like safely shoots it towards the net rather than, you know, getting creative with it. And I think that was very representative of the time, you know. And that's, oh, this is almost amazing from Radosin, right? You know, that little double flip reset there. That was smart, good plays. Radosin just taking up some time here. But yeah, I think there was a point where it started to get quite creative again. I think it was Clears gets a really good shot about 9 minutes 30, which is pretty saucy. And that itself, I think, initiated this slightly more aggressive approach from everyone. But yeah, you've seen a few of these touches are a little bit more simplified, right? Just a little bit more, you know, like just throw yourself into the ball, see if it sticks. Getting some good 50-50s here. You know, and there's so many like fine margins with these bumps as well. Speaking of bumps, there was actually a really important bump from Mosin. You know, when Zen does, I think it's when Zen does the triple flip reset. I think Mosin comes in and clears out Radosin. So it's these kind of little decisions, these tiny little bumps that can be massive to dictate whether a team has the offense. And I think that really shows Rule 1 are very good at dissolving pressure. That's their greatest asset as a team. I think we haven't given Rule 1 enough time on the camera. I think it's very easy to look at this gameplay and be like, I want to watch the team that's in offense the whole time. But, you know, like, that was almost a goal there. Khalir's faking out because they were low on boost. Alpha off the post saves it away, and it's tiny little margins. That was a really nice touch from Alpha. Yeah, you can see these touches are a little bit safe, a little bit risk-free. Yeah, I think it's this bump here. You see Radosin in the background there getting bumped, and that meant they fully dissolved that pressure. So it's those kind of decisions from Mosin that are huge. And it just seemed like everyone was playing on the slightly safer side. No one wanted to overcommit too much. No one wanted to get too aggressive. But let's see, little decisions like this, great little patience, great read. I think that's one of the biggest factors in this game, is everyone's got an amazing read of other people. So you're rarely going to be able to get away with those little trickier touches, and that's where you have to get very creative. And what ends up being the goal is a little bit of a series of good touches from Vitality, I think it's fair to say, that leads to some good pressure. But ultimately, it felt like Vitality were one or two good touches away from scoring a goal for a lot of this game, where Rule 1 rarely got into those situations. So credit to Rule 1 for holding on. I don't want to say holding on because that sounds like they never had a chance, but for Rule 1 for being able to defend this long against Vitality, I think that in itself was impressive. Amazing goal line defense there from Ruas. I will go back and watch that. Like, such low boost. Read that the whole way. Not a huge amount they could do. They just had to had to commit to that read. We can see this pressure here from Vitality. A great read from Moss in there. Again, look at the boost amounts. You see these kinds of moments, and I think if Vitality were a little bit more patient and were playing as if their opponents had no boost, I think they would have been able to score. But it's one of the hardest things to do when you're playing along overtime like this. You try and force the next goal a little bit sometimes, and rather than going for that, you know, that high play that works out quite well. That fast double tap, that kind of thing. Because fast double taps are one of the easiest things to mess up and lead to an overcommit. So I think that's where these overtimes, everyone takes out their riskier options and starts leaning into their safer options a bit more. Like these kind of touches here. Boom that ball away. Keep it safe. Really nice setup from Radosin. Ruas reads it well. And I think this is the other thing as well that I think a lot of people could learn from this, is all of the defensive touches are leading towards possession for the team that makes it. So you see here, like Mosin pops up in the middle, Kalirs was ready for it. They go for the 50, Ruas was ready for it. Alpha blocks that ball there. But ultimately, Ruas knew that it was kind of safe, and it's that's what Rule 1 are very good at, is whenever they're making these defensive touches, it goes back in their favor. But this was the one that I think was the closest to being a goal in the whole game. Clear's unbelievable play here. This is what we're talking about. When they've got 100 boost, they're unreal. But I think if they can work out a way to get themselves in space with 100 boost more often, then they're going to be threatening. Because look at this. We'll watch that from the defense's point of view as well. Like, that's so close to being a goal. It started to go over the goal line a little bit. But then, yeah, you just see here. So this is... Mosin does miss this shot, and he has to place this perfectly on the side. But this is what we're talking about, that boost inefficiency. You know, a little bit more boost here, and it's a whole different story. You know, this is the fine margins that dictate a game like this, is just a little bit more boost efficiency. And it's so hard to do that on LAN. Like, when you're playing under pressure on a big stage, you don't want to be late to something. So you want to make sure you get there on time. So you don't want to be inefficient. You don't want to waste any boost. I'm sure the adrenaline's pumping this whole game, so they are overusing that boost a little bit at times. Ruas unreal in that 1v1 situation. We all know that. Zen knows that. But I do worry for Rule 1 that with Mosin and Ruas not contributing as much offensively as Kalirs, they lack a little bit of that risk-taking offensive threat, which you can see with Radosin, Zen, and Alpha together. All three of them are threatening in space with boost. And that's where Vitality looks so good in this tournament, is they really are... I think so at one point the commentators started describing them as a three-headed dragon when they meant Hydra. I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, they really are... or even include Ferrer, right? All four of them contribute massively to their success. But yeah, you can see this just use of the space. Vitality using the full pitch to work with. Ruas, great goal save there. Zen getting there a little bit too early, rushing that touch a little bit. Alpha trying his classic off the ceiling reset. So we're starting to get close to the goal. But yeah, this triple flip reset from Zen. The fact that Mosin followed that the whole way, that's unbelievable. But again, you see the kinds of things that these guys can do when they've got 100 boost is amazing. I think if they just found themselves in high boost situations more often, then they could have taken the series, because it was very close the whole way through. It was one of the closest 4-0s I've ever seen. Obviously, with the other two games, I think the first two games were 1-goal games, and then this one was the long overtime. Then the final one, I think, was 3-1, but still, like, it was so close the whole way through. And I honestly think Rule 1 are a bit more boost efficiency and a few more tools in their toolbox away from being a major contending team. I mean, they were at this event, right? Top 4. But if they want to continue having streaks like this, I think that boost efficiency could be the big factor. But yeah, just good pressure here from Vitality. Alpha with his classic ceiling read intercepts. I think the big thing with the way Alpha does these is you see how much chaos it causes in the defense. Because of how quickly he recovers out of them. It's very good. And Zen there just catching Rawas off guard. And this is again, like, I know that it's like I keep bringing up these tiny little margins, but Rawas a bit more static as a player. At this higher level, you need to be able to play with a bit more speed and a bit more momentum. So Rawas did get caught off guard. I don't think this was Rawas's strongest series. I think they were involved in they scored 0 goals, sorry, across the whole series. A lot of saves, very good in defense, of course. We know that's always going to be the case. But definitely that static nature of Rawas can sometimes catch him off guard against these stronger, fast-paced teams. And ultimately, Vitality were just quicker, quicker, more effective with their boost and more deadly on the ball. But Rule 1 held them strong the whole game. And there we go. That's that final scoreboard there. What's that? 31 shots for Vitality and 29 saves there for Rule 1. So what an amazing series. Let me know what you thought of this series. I had a great time watching Championship Sunday. If you're watching this on YouTube, I think I'll be live as this video goes up. I'm going to be analysing the final between Vitality and BDS. So go check that out on my Twitch channel. It'll be in the link below. Let me know in the description what you thought when you saw this live. We all were there. It was a big part of history. And Rocket League had one of the best weekends ever. So I'll catch you in the next video.